The woman I'd been in love with for all 4 years of college was heartbroken. She called me, and we decided to drown our sorrows. I just didn't realize I was the sorrow she planned on drowning. We tangled ourselves up in each other for one long, exhausting night. The next morning, we were officially together. I thought I'd finally gotten everything I'd ever wanted. Then came graduation. The warmth she'd shown me vanished, replaced by an icy gaze as she told me we were over. After one last, desperate night together, she left for a fellowship in London and never looked back. 5 years passed. Then one day we met again. The medical prodigy I once knew had become an even bigger name, now an internationally renowned surgeon. She stood at the front of the conference room, her hair pulled back neatly, glasses perched on her nose, a crisp white coat hiding any hint of the woman I remembered. Her expression was as cool and distant as ever. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Ava Chen." That face. It was still arresting, the kind of beauty that silenced rooms. Every doctor and nurse in attendance couldn't help but stare. Dr. Wallace, the chief of surgery, gestured toward me. "And this Dr. Chen is our hospital's top attending surgeon, Dr. Ethan Cole. He's one of our best." He beamed at us. "You two are the brightest young talents we have. You should get to know each other." This was it, the first time we'd seen each other in 5 years. Every scenario I had ever imagined for this moment, angry, passionate, wistful, flashed through my mind, but standing here, I couldn't find a single word to say. Her eyes followed Dr. Wallace's gesture and landed on me. The girl I knew was gone, replaced by a poised, professional woman. We just stood there, the silence stretching until the air in the room grew thick with unspoken history. Dr. Wallace finally broke the tension with a hearty laugh. "Well, with Dr. Chen joining us, we've got ourselves a real power couple here in the department." He wasn't wrong. In terms of both skill and appearance, we were miles ahead of our peers. My heart hammered against my ribs, a flicker of hope stirring inside me. But Ava's expression remained unchanged, as if she were looking at a complete stranger. "Thank you, Dr. Wallace, but I should mention, I have a fiancé." A fiancé. The words hit me like a physical blow. My mind went completely blank. I don't remember the rest of the meeting, how it ended, or what was said. The rest of the day was a blur. My thoughts a chaotic mess. I finally made it home after my shift, my phone having buzzed nonstop all day. I unlocked it to see that our old college group chat, dormant for years, had exploded with messages. The topic, of course, was Ava. I heard Ava Chen was already a senior attending surgeon in London. Why would she come back here? What else? Love, obviously. Rumor is her fiancé moved back to the States, and she followed him. The chat was buzzing like they just uncovered the biggest secret in the world. Ava was always the untouchable ice queen. Who could possibly have that kind of pull? Then, someone tagged me. "Hey, Ethan Cole, you and Ava were pretty close back in the day, right? You know who this fiancé is? Spill the details." Of course, I didn't know. Just like no one knew we had ever been together. A bitter taste filled my mouth. I ignored the message and set my phone face down on the table. Just then, the doorbell rang. I figured it was the takeout I'd ordered. But when I opened the door, a courier stood there. "Mr. Cole, this is a package for you from a Ms. Chen. Please sign here. Ms. Chen." "Ava?" Confused, I signed for the box and brought it inside. The moment I opened it, the world fell out from under me. Inside was everything I had ever given her. The paper cranes I'd folded, the letters I'd written, the clumsy clay sculptures we'd painted together, the ring I had carved for her from a piece of wood, and our photos. All of it. The box trembled in my hands. I don't know how long I stood there before I finally set it down. I grabbed my phone and found her contact. Her name was still pinned to the top of my message list, but the chat history was empty. I wanted to ask her why. I typed and deleted, the words feeling hollow and useless. Why would her first act upon returning be to send all of this back to me? She was making a statement, drawing a final, clean line between us. What was the point in even asking? I let out a hollow laugh. As I swiped to exit the chat, my thumb slipped and accidentally sent a single, stupid smiley face emoji. Panicked, I tried to unsend it, but a small red exclamation mark popped up next to the message. Blocked. That tiny red icon felt like a siren, blaring in the quiet of my apartment. I thought I had buried the past, but now it all came rushing back. 3rd year of college. She had received an early acceptance offer to a prestigious surgical fellowship at Harvard Medical School. But I was in Boston, and she didn't want to go. Her parents had given her an ultimatum. She could stay if she won the Boston Surgical Symposium competition. When her mentor found out, He had called me furious. How can you be so selfish? You're ruining her. You're holding back her entire future, he'd shouted. A talent like Ava's shouldn't be chained to this city. Then her parents and friends all came after me, blaming me for clipping her wings. I knew they were right. I didn't want to be the reason she missed an opportunity like that. So I went to a senior resident who was organizing the symposium and asked him to disqualify her. When she found out what I'd done, she confronted me. We had the biggest fight of our lives. It was the last time I saw her, until today. My eyes fell back on the box, a time capsule of a life that no longer existed. I carefully closed the lid and pushed it away. In the days that followed, the tension between us became unbearable. We worked in the same department, but we moved around each other like ghosts, two strangers occupying the same space. I tried, countless times, to break the silence, to find some neutral ground. But Ava looked straight through me, every single time. It got so bad I started seriously considering a transfer. Maybe if we never saw each other, we could both finally move on. Soon enough, Friday rolled around. Ava invited all the off-duty staff to a department dinner. The last thing I wanted was to go. But my colleague Leo Martinez was relentless. Come on, man. It's at the Cypress Grove. That place is a private estate. You can't even get a reservation without connections, he pleaded. When are regular guys like us ever going to get a chance to go somewhere like that? Dr. Chun is pulling out all the stops. I couldn't fight his enthusiasm, and eventually, I let him drag me along. The Cypress Grove was as exclusive as he'd said. I ended up seated across the long table from Ava. Every time I glanced up, I was met with the sight of her cool, beautiful face. It was the first time since she'd returned that I could just look at her without interruption. A few minutes later, a man in a tailored suit walked into the private dining room. He moved with purpose, heading straight for Ava, and placed a proprietary hand on her shoulder. Hello, everyone. I'm Caleb Vance, Ava's fiancé. I also own the Cypress Grove, he announced smoothly. You're all Ava's colleagues, so please, enjoy yourselves tonight. Everything is on the house. Watching them together, so comfortable and close, a sour knot formed in my stomach. I quickly looked away, focusing on my water glass, but the chatter from my colleagues was impossible to ignore. Caleb is brilliant, and so handsome. He and Dr. Chun are the perfect couple. The dinner felt more like their engagement party, and I was trapped in a frozen hell. I had to get out. Hey, something urgent came up. I've got to go, I muttered to Leo, getting ready to slip away. But as I stood up, someone called my name. I looked up instinctively and met Caleb Vance's gaze. I didn't recognize him, and a flicker of confusion passed through me. Before I could say anything, a colleague next to me asked him, Mr. Vance, do you know our Dr. Cole? Every eye in the room turned to Caleb. He smiled, a polished, easy grin. Of course, he's Ava's ex-boyfriend. The air was sucked out of the room. I froze, my entire body rigid. Then, all those eyes swiveled to me, their curiosity like 1,000 tiny needles. Seriously? Dr. Cole, you and Dr. Chun actually dated? I didn't know how to answer. Ever since she'd come back, Ava had acted like I didn't exist. I stayed silent, and the group turned their questioning gaze back to her. Dr. Chun, is that true? My own eyes found hers, my hands clenching into fists in my pockets. Ava didn't look at me. She simply pulled Caleb into the seat beside her before answering, her voice chillingly detached. That's all in the past. Everyone got the message. She didn't want to talk about it, and they quickly moved on, laughing and changing the subject. But after that night, something shifted. Maybe it was just in my head, but I felt my colleagues looking at me differently. Whenever I tried to approach them, they'd scatter. Then one day, I was in a bathroom stall when I heard their voices. I asked around. One of the nurses said, apparently Dr. Cole was a total simp for her in college. Obsessed. Chased her relentlessly. No matter how many times she turned him down, he just wouldn't give up. It's still going on now. But Dr. Cole is so handsome. I can't picture him as a simp. Well, Dr. Chun is gorgeous. You can't really blame him, right? Ha ha ha. But she's about to get married. Isn't that basically stalking at this point? The words hit me like a physical blow. My head felt like it was going to explode. I waited until their voices faded down the hall before I dared to step out. Staring at my reflection in the empty bathroom, a wave of suffocation washed over me. After a long moment, I numbly started walking back to my office. As I passed Ava's door, I heard another woman's voice from inside. I just transferred here, and all the nurses are gossiping about you and Ethan Cole. The things they're saying are pretty nasty. The voice was familiar. It was Jessica, Ava's old college roommate. I heard Ava give a non-committal hum in response. Jessica pressed on. So why don't you explain it to them? Set the record straight. Her words echoed my own thoughts from 5 years ago, when I tried desperately to explain the misunderstanding about the symposium, only to be met with that same wall of indifference. I took a deep breath and raised my hand to knock, but then I heard Jessica say something that stopped me cold. Besides, you found out the truth about that whole misunderstanding years ago, didn't you? It felt like a punch to the gut, a sharp, searing pain that stole my breath. All this time, I thought she hated me because of that lie. I thought I deserved it, but she knew. She knew everything. Staring at the closed door, I lowered my trembling hand and, with a sudden surge of anger, shoved it open. The 2 women in the office snapped their heads toward me. I fought to keep my expression neutral, to bottle the storm raging inside me. Jessica gave a nervous laugh, sensing the electric tension, and quickly made an excuse to leave. The click of the door latch seemed to amplify the hum of the air conditioner, filling the room with an irritating drone. I clutched the patient file in my hand, my knuckles turning white. Finally, I broke the silence. What happened back then? You've known all this time. Ava coolly changed the subject. Is there something you need, Dr. Cole? That same deflection. That same refusal to even acknowledge our past. I had spent years telling myself she didn't know the truth, that I deserved her hatred, but she knew. She knew everything and let me believe otherwise. My chest heaved, and the sharp corner of the file folder dug into my skin, the sting bringing me back to the present. Maybe this was just karma. Maybe this was what I deserved. I looked down, hiding the bitterness in my eyes, and held out the file. When I spoke again, my voice was as calm and clinical as hers. There's a surgery. I need you. Her fingernail traced a line across the cover of the report. You can handle this kind of procedure on your own. The patient has multiple comorbidities, I explained earnestly. With you assisting, the success rate will be significantly higher. Ava fell silent. My heart pounded in my chest, waiting for her answer. Leave the file. I'll let you know about scheduling. She had agreed. The knot of anxiety in my stomach loosened. Thanks. The day of the surgery arrived. Ava took the lead with me assisting. Our hands moved in perfect sync, an unspoken rhythm between us that time hadn't erased. We were a flawless team. After the final stitch, I glanced at her profile, and for a fleeting moment we were back in college, partners in a training lab, our scores always tied for first place. Back then, after a successful procedure, she would pull off her gloves and give me a smile so brilliant it could melt the frost in a morgue. But that was then. Now, we were just 2 strangers who happened to work well together. The only words that passed between us were cold, necessary commands. Instrument count is correct, a nurse announced. Ava turned and walked out without a word. I followed a few paces behind, my eyes fixed on the back of her blue scrubs. Thanks again, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Just doing my job, she replied, never breaking her stride. I stopped in the middle of the hallway, a question burning on my tongue. Does it have to be this way? But I couldn't bring myself to ask. Just then, Leo slapped me on the shoulder, jolting me. Chief Wallace is looking for volunteers. There was a massive flood up in Rockport, and the hospital is putting together a medical relief team. You in? Maybe getting away from Ava was the only way to finally cut the cord. I nodded. I'm in. Before leaving, I went home to see my dad. When he heard I was going to the disaster zone, he insisted on cooking all my favorite foods. Over dinner, he must have noticed the gloom hanging over me. Ethan, he started gently. I heard that Ava girl is back, working at your hospital. He paused. Are you too? I was surprised he knew. I forced a smile. It's nothing, Dad. We're just colleagues now. He saw I didn't want to talk about it and let the subject drop. The day of our departure was gray and overcast. A charter bus idled at the hospital entrance, spewing diesel fumes. I grabbed my duffel bag and joined the group. Stepping onto the bus, I scanned the seats, looking for an empty spot. And then my body went rigid. In the back row, sitting by the window, was the one person I was trying to escape. Ava Chun. I was one of the last to board, and the only seat left was the one next to Ava. I hesitated in the aisle, frozen, until the driver's impatient honk forced me to move. I sat down stiffly, my body ramrod straight. Ava stared out the window, completely ignoring my presence. As the bus rumbled to life, I held my breath, every muscle tense to avoid any accidental contact. But I couldn't stop my eyes from drifting to her. The cool mask she wore at the hospital had softened. Her profile was serene against the passing landscape. For a moment, I was transported back to our first trip together. She had held my hand the entire time. Her fingers laced through mine, never letting go. I remembered the warm sun casting a golden halo around her as we stood on the beach. The cry of gulls our only witnesses as we kissed. We had wandered through city streets like any other couple in love, wrapped in each other's arms. Ethan Cole. Ava's cold voice shattered the memory. I snapped back to reality, meeting her brown eyes. They held nothing but ice. We're here. Get off. My heart sank. I mumbled an apology, grabbed my bag, and hurried off the bus. Days of relentless rain had caused a massive flood, turning the access road into a river of mud. The bus couldn't go any further. I pulled the hood of my rain poncho over my head and followed the rescue team into the devastated town. The rain was still coming down, turning the ground into a treacherous slick of mud. I was carrying a heavy box of medical supplies when my foot suddenly slipped. My center of gravity was gone. I reached out instinctively to grab the person next to me. It was Ava. She saw me falling and, in a split-second, reflexive movement, she pivoted away from me. My hand grasped at empty air. Just as I was about to hit the ground, a strong arm caught me. It was Captain Miller, the rescue team leader. You okay, dear? Cole? He asked, his voice steady. Watch your step. It's slippery. I'm fine. Thanks. I mumbled, shaking my head. My gaze shot to Ava. She was looking at me, too. For a second, our eyes met. The image of her recoiling from me, that purely instinctual rejection, sent a bitter pang through my chest. I dropped my gaze to the mud. Then, I heard her voice, sharp and cold as the rain. Don't hold everyone back. The team can manage without you. Every head turned in my direction. My fingers dug into the cardboard box, turning my knuckles white. Without a word, I pushed past her and trudged on. The rain intensified, the path growing steeper and more difficult. Half an hour later, we reached the temporary command post. There was no time to rest. Ava, as the medical team lead, immediately started assigning tasks. Suddenly, a rescue worker ran up, out of breath. We have a family in a low-lying area we can't evacuate. Someone has a high fever, and the medicine we gave them isn't working. We need a doctor now. I'll go with you, I said without hesitation, grabbing a medical kit. A colleague grabbed my arm. The rain's getting worse, Ethan. The only way there is a narrow trail along the cliffs. It's too dangerous to go out now. A debate erupted. Half the doctors agreed with me. We couldn't risk missing the critical window for treatment. The other half argued that the conditions were too hazardous. A doctor's safety had to come first. The group was at a stalemate. Dr. Chun, what's your call? I demanded, seeing her standing silently. She glanced at me, her face unreadable. Then she made her decision. We ensure the safety of our doctors first. And the patient? I asked, incredulous. This couldn't be the Ava I knew, the doctor who would do anything for a patient. She didn't answer, simply turning and walking toward the edge of the camp. The sky was a dark, angry gray. I followed her out into the downpour and grabbed the sleeve of her poncho. Ava, have you forgotten the oath we took? Our primary duty is to our patients. What are you doing? She glared at me. Let go. I held on tighter. She tried to wrench her arm away. In the struggle, something silver slipped out from the collar of her shirt. My breath caught in my throat. I stared, frozen. It was a ring, hanging on a silver chain. The ring I had carved for her with my own 2 hands. My anger evaporated, replaced by a wave of confusion. I opened my mouth to ask why she still had it, why she had kept it all these years. But in the next second, she ripped the necklace from her neck and, with a flick of her wrist, threw it into the raging floodwaters below. The ring arced through the gray air, a final glint of silver before it vanished. I lunged forward instinctively, trying to catch it. Are you crazy? Ava grabbed me, her grip surprisingly strong. That water is 15 feet deep. Do you want to die? I could only watch, helpless, as the murky, churning water swallowed the last piece of our past. I turned to look at her, and the cold rain on my skin suddenly felt like ice. Why did you keep it? I asked, my voice hoarse. And why throw it away in front of me now? She paused for a beat before delivering the answer. I kept it because I forgot to throw it away. I threw it away because it's meaningless. With that, she let go of my arm and walked away. I stood in the rain for a long time, her words echoing in my head. Tears mixed with the raindrops on my face. A jagged bolt of lightning tore across the sky, followed by a deafening clap of thunder. The sound jolted me, reminding me of why we were arguing in the first place. I had to get to that patient. I spun around, looking for a guide. The only rescue worker I knew by name was Captain Miller. He met my determined gaze with a serious expression. Dr. Cole, the risk is extremely high right now. Are you sure about this? I nodded, my resolve firm. He didn't argue. Minutes later, I was in a small, rocking rescue boat, the foul-smelling floodwaters churning with mud and debris around us. The patient's location wasn't far, but the current was so strong it took us 40 minutes to reach the half-submerged house. All the residents had gathered on the second floor. With Captain Miller's help, I climbed a ladder to an open window. As I pulled myself through, the first thing I saw was a familiar figure bent over a patient, administering aid. It was Ava. A slow realization dawned on me. She had planned to come alone all along. My heart twisted with a confusing mix of emotions. Ava must have sensed me. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second before she turned back to her work. The patient's fever had already broken. She was stabilizing. I wanted to help, but as I took a step toward her, she took a giant step back, as if I were carrying a plague. My hand, holding a syringe, froze midair for a moment before I forced myself to continue. Outside, the flood raged and the wind howled, but inside the small room, the silence was deafening. After I finished distributing the last of the medication, I saw Ava standing alone by the window, her back to me. I hesitated, then walked over. If you were going to save them anyway, why didn't you just tell everyone? Her voice was cold, drawing a clear line between us. It has nothing to do with you. Forgot to throw it away. Meaningless. Nothing to do with you. Her answers were a brutal trilogy of rejection. I fought back a surge of pain. Doing it this way just makes everyone misunderstand you. Misunderstand? She cut me off, her eyes flashing with a cold, mocking light. What right do you have to talk to me about misunderstandings? My heart clenched. I knew she was talking about the symposium, but she already knew the truth. I was about to say something, anything, when a deep, rumbling roar came from outside. The makeshift levee the rescue team had built had given way. A massive wave of water slammed against the house, heading for the second story. Screams filled the room. Ava reacted instantly, shielding the patients and children. The force of the water threw her against a wall. I saw her bite her lip in pain. Through the chaos, I heard Captain Miller's frantic shout. Where's Dr. Cole? Has anyone seen Dr. Cole? Ignoring her own pain, Ava's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a sudden, raw panic. The spot by the window where I had been standing was now empty. Foul, gritty water filled my lungs. The cold was a shock, triggering a violent coughing fit. A crushing pressure built in my chest, and I thrashed wildly before my world went black. When I came to, I was in a medical tent. The sounds of the busy relief camp filtered in from outside. My body ached as I slowly pushed myself into a sitting position. I was alone, and 4-line was taped to my hand, a cold fluid slowly dripping into my veins. Just then, the tent flap was pulled back. I looked up and saw Ava. She was in a white coat, her beautiful face etched with exhaustion. Seeing that I was awake, she performed a routine check, asking about my condition with professional detachment. There was no emotion in her voice, no hint of anything beyond her duty as a doctor. I answered her questions mechanically. The silence in the small tent grew heavy and suffocating. Dr. Chan, your fiancé is here. A voice called from outside. Without a moment's hesitation, Ava turned and left. The chatter from outside drifted in, loud and clear. Her fiancé brought all these supplies. He's a lifesaver. You can tell how much he loves her, worrying about her like this. Mr. Vance is so generous. I heard the next town over is also short on supplies, and he's going to drive a shipment over there himself. Dr. Chun was worried, so she's going with him. The words conjured an image of Ava and Caleb, close and intimate, a perfect couple. I remembered the dinner at his estate, the way I had felt so utterly out of place. I looked down at the pale blue veins under the skin of my hand. After a moment's hesitation, I pulled out the 4-needle and walked out of the tent. Ava and Caleb were standing by a large supply truck. He was gently straightening the collar of her coat, his voice soft. Dr. Cole is still recovering. Are you sure it's okay for you to leave with me? I froze, remembering the ring she had worn for years, only to throw it away the moment I saw it. I needed to know, once and for all, how she really felt about me. Then I heard her answer. There are other doctors here. Besides, what does he have to do with me? My heart stopped. My face went pale. So that was it. That was her real answer. All this time, I had been clinging to a childish fantasy. I didn't listen to another word. I stumbled back into the empty tent, One of my colleagues came in a few minutes later. Dr. Cole, glad to see you're okay. We were all worried. He continued. The chief just called. The main medical team will be here tomorrow, but they need an attending surgeon to head back to Boston to manage the department. I nodded numbly, then thought of Ava. What about Dr. Chun? She's staying in the disaster area, he said, shaking his head, probably to be with her fiancé. A bitter smile touched my lips. Right? I left before Ava and Caleb departed on their supply run, taking the first transport back to Boston. The surgical ward was buried under a backlog of high-risk cases. I threw myself into my work, barely sleeping. One night, while on call, I got a frantic page from the emergency room. Dr. Cole, we have a critical situation. We need you in the ER now. I raced down the empty hallways, but when I burst through the doors of the trauma bay, my world came crashing down. Lying on the gurney, clinging to life, was my father. In all my years as a doctor, I had never once faced a loved one on the operating table. My entire body started to shake. My mind was a terrifying, static-filled void. I was useless. I stood there, frozen, my voice trembling as I tried to direct the other nurses and doctors. 2.5 hours later, my father's condition finally stabilized. I stood in his hospital room, my eyes fixed on his pale, unconscious face. I had no idea how he could have suffered a fractured skull. Dr. Cole, a colleague said gently. We stabilized him, but there's still a fragment inside his cranium that's affecting further treatment. There's also a shadow near the basal ganglia. We can't rule out an internal bleed. We can't wait. He paused, his expression pained. You're his next of kin, so you can't operate. Right now. Dr. Chun is the only surgeon in this hospital qualified to perform this procedure. His words exploded in my head. Fighting back tears, I pulled out my phone and called Ava. No answer. I called again, and again. Nothing. Over the next few days, my father's condition worsened. He was resuscitated twice. Just as the attending physician was about to issue a critical condition notice, news came that the disaster relief team was back. Clinging to that last shred of hope, I ran to Ava's office. Dr. Chun. I burst in before she even had a chance to sit down, my face haggard from sleepless nights. I slapped his chart down on her desk, swallowing my pride, my voice pleading. I'm his son. I can't operate. Please. Save my father. She gave the file a cursory glance, her expression as cold as marble, and delivered her verdict. No. The word hung in the air, and the room plunged into a dead silence. I stared at her, certain I had misheard, but the icy daggers in her eyes told me it was real. Only you can do this surgery, I pleaded, my voice cracking. I couldn't understand. The Ava I knew would never stand by and watch someone die. Why? Was it just because the patient was my father? I tried again, desperate. I know you hate me because of what happened 5 years ago. I get it, but this is my father. He had nothing to do with it. You're a doctor. How can you refuse to save a life? My voice dropped to a whisper. I'll resign. I'll leave Boston forever. Just please. Don't you understand? She cut me off, her brow furrowed with irritation. I said I won't do it. Her words were laced with a chilling finality that made me tremble. I looked at the woman I had carried in my heart for 5 long years, and my voice rose to a raw, ragged shout. Just because he's my father? Why? Why? I screamed, my composure shattering. Ava, how can you live with yourself? How can you wear that white coat? Are you even a doctor anymore? She stood in silence, her face a blank mask. My rage collapsed into helpless despair. Tears welled in my eyes, and I choked them back, the anger on my face melting into profound disappointment. Ava, I never knew you were this kind of person. My voice was hollow. Maybe I should have never met you. If it weren't for our history, I wouldn't have spent 5 years in this private hell. The look of regret and disillusionment in my eyes seemed to finally get to her. She looked almost agitated. Ethan. Before she could finish, the door flew open. A nurse stood there, her face pale. Dr. Cole, your father. He's crashing. The color drained from my face. I bolted from the room, my heart pounding a frantic prayer against my ribs. Dad, you're the only family I have left. Please, don't leave me. Please be okay. But when I reached the ICU, his bed was surrounded by staff. Over their shoulders, I could see the monitor. A single, flat green line stretched across the screen. Beep. The cold, monotonous tone of the machine drilled into my ears, and the world seemed to freeze. In a daze, I watched as my colleagues finally stopped their efforts and turned to me with expressions of sorrow. Dr. Cole, we're so sorry. I'm afraid resuscitation was unsuccessful. The patient has no vital signs. I don't know how I got through the following days. The death certificate, the cremation, accepting the urn, the funeral. It was all a blur, my mind a hollow shell. As I was leaving the cemetery after the service, I saw her, Ava. She was dressed in a simple black dress, her expression unreadable. She looked like she wanted to say something. Our eyes met for a brief second. The cold wind bit at my skin, and reality came rushing back. Ethan. I stared right through her and walked past without a word. A ghost in a black suit. I left her standing there alone as her name was carried away by the wind. Ava watched my trembling back disappear. A complex emotion I hadn't seen since her return flickering in her eyes. Her phone vibrated, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Caleb. Is Ethan okay? Did you get a chance to explain to him why you had to refuse the surgery? Ava didn't reply. She turned off her phone, gave one last look at the empty path, and walked away. In the weeks after the funeral, the sharp edges of my grief began to dull into a constant, heavy ache. The tears had run dry. I couldn't stay in Boston anymore. I settled my affairs, sold my father's house, submitted my resignation to the hospital, and booked a one-way flight to Europe. Meanwhile, at Boston General Hospital, Ava was getting ready to leave for the day when she saw a cleaning crew clearing out my office. She frowned and walked over. What's going on here? The custodian, recognizing the department's top surgeon, explained. Oh, didn't you hear? Dr. Chin? Dr. Cole resigned. Ethan, resigned? Ava froze, a look of genuine panic, something I'd never seen on her, flashing across her usually composed face. When did he resign? Did he say where he was going? I'm just a cleaner, the custodian said, taken aback. I wouldn't know any of that. Ava didn't wait for more. She spun around and hurried toward the chief's office. She knew the loss of his father had hit me hard. She had planned to give me some space, to let me grieve before trying to explain everything. She never imagined I would just leave. 30,000 feet in the air. The plane cut through the clouds. My father's death had triggered a severe bout of insomnia, and I'd been relying on melatonin just to get a few hours of broken sleep. I was drifting in a hazy, half-conscious state when the plane suddenly lurched violently. Panic erupted in the cabin. The aircraft felt like it was falling. My head slammed against something hard, and then, nothing. I had a long, exhausting dream. I was struggling, fighting my way toward the surface. With a final, desperate push, my eyes flew open. I was lying in a soft, king-sized bed. For a disoriented moment, I thought the crash, the grief, all of it had been a terrible nightmare. I sat up, confused, and saw her, Ava, sleeping peacefully beside me. My brain short-circuited. A tidal wave of white noise filled my head. Why were we in the same bed? What the hell was happening? My first instinct was to grab my phone and get out, but as the screen lit up, the date displayed on the lock screen made me freeze. October 23rd, 2026. I stared at it, my blood turning to ice. Impossible. I had traveled a year into the future. As a doctor, I didn't believe in ghosts or time travel. After a moment of frantic thought, only one possibility remained. I had lost an entire year of my memory. The woman beside me slept on, oblivious. I tried to slip out of bed as quietly as possible, but an arm immediately wrapped around my waist, pulling me back. Stay, she murmured, her voice soft and sleepy. Just a little longer. Her warm breath ghosted across my neck, her body pressing against mine. I went completely rigid, my muscles locking up. I could vividly remember her cold rejection, the icy glare as my father lay dying. This sudden tenderness felt monstrous, sending a chill down my spine. She must have felt me tense up, because her arm tightened slightly. Are you cold? She whispered. No, just thirsty, I managed to say, using it as an excuse to pull away. But before I could move, Ava sat up, swung her legs out of bed, and padded into the kitchen. She returned a moment later with a glass of water. Was this the same Ava Chin? I stared at her, dumbfounded, as I took the glass, dressed in a simple white silk nightgown, her long hair falling over her shoulders. She looked impossibly soft and gentle. She noticed my daze and reached out, her fingers gently brushing my cheek. What are you thinking about? She asked, a small smile playing on her lips. I took a sip of water, hiding my confusion. Just a weird dream. She didn't press. I have to run to the hospital for an emergency case, she said. leaving the room. Breakfast is on the counter. Take your time. The front door clicked shut, leaving me alone in the apartment. I still felt like I was in a daze, unable to make sense of any of it. What had happened in the last year? What was my relationship with Ava now? Pushing my questions aside, I got dressed and headed to the hospital myself. In the hallways, nurses and doctors greeted me warmly. Some were familiar faces, others were complete strangers, but they all knew me. I found Leo Martinez, my closest colleague, at the nurse's station. On the counter was a large platter of pastries with the logo for the Cypress Grove printed on the box. I paused. Leo, just finishing his rounds, spotted me. He waved a hand in front of my face. Earth to Ethan. I snapped out of it. What's all this? I asked, nodding at the pastries. Leo gave me a strange look. Caleb Vance sent them, of course. He sends something every day. I thought for a moment before asking the question that had been burning in my mind. So, what's the deal with him and Ava now? Leo's expression shifted from confusion to genuine concern. Like he was looking at a crazy person. Dude, are you feeling okay? Caleb Vance is her fiancé. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. If he was still her fiancé, then who the hell was I? I pulled Leo into my office and closed the door. Why are you acting so weird today? He asked, studying my face. Leo, do you remember that international flight I was on? The one that had the accident? I asked, my voice deadly serious. He looked confused but nodded. Yeah, the plane had a mechanical failure and had to turn back. All the passengers were fine. But you. I cut him off. When I woke up, I'd lost all memory of what happened between then and now. Leo's eyes widened, but then a look of relief washed over his face. Wait, you got your old memories back? Seeing my confusion, he quickly explained. You didn't lose the last year, Ethan. You lost everything before that. The accident, your father. All of it. So, I had amnesia. The pieces started clicking into place. The long, exhausting dream. Maybe that was my memory rebooting. Then what about me and her? Leo's expression grew complicated. He hesitated before speaking. Dr. Chun was your attending physician after your breakdown. She took care of you that whole time. But when you finally came around, you didn't remember anything. Or anyone. He sighed. She brought in the best psychiatrist in the country. He said the intense grief caused a psychological trauma, which made you selectively forget certain events. He was my colleague, not my therapist, so he didn't elaborate. But I understood enough. I thanked him and left the office, a heavy weight settling in my chest. I needed air. I took the stairs up to the rooftop. The cold wind whipped around me as I stood at the ledge, looking out over the city. I felt completely alone. Footsteps sounded behind me. I turned. It was Ava. She was in her white coat, her expression as cool as ever. But her eyes, when they met mine, were softer than I'd ever seen them. Leo told me you were up here. I turned back to the skyline, saying nothing. A moment later, I felt her arms wrap around me from behind. Her familiar scent, a mix of antiseptic and something faintly floral, filled my senses, but my body reacted with a jolt of rejection. I pulled away. Ava looked at me, a flicker of hurt in her eyes. What's wrong? She asked gently. You were the one who said we had to pretend to be strangers at the hospital. Her words stopped me. A memory, fuzzy at the edges, surfaced. What? What are we to each other? Exactly. I asked. The softness in her face vanished, replaced by a flicker of alarm. She opened her mouth to speak, but her phone rang, shrill and demanding. She glanced at the caller ID, then back at me, her expression unreadable. Without another word, she answered the call and hurried away. A surgeon's work was never done. As the sun began to set, I went back to the apartment. Our apartment. Stepping inside, the whole place felt wrong. There were things of mine everywhere. My books on the shelf, my coat by the door, but I had no memory of putting them there. The place was cozy, warm, like a home we had shared for years. But the memory of my father, the thought of Caleb Vance, made it impossible for me to accept any of it. The last of the daylight faded, plunging the room into darkness. I sat on the sofa, unmoving, for hours. Finally, the door opened. Ava stepped inside, pausing when she was met with complete darkness. She fumbled for the light switch, startled. Before she could flip it, my voice echoed from the shadows. Ava, this whole charade is over. We're done. The room fell into a dead silence. After a long moment, Ava's voice, trembling slightly, broke the stillness. What's wrong? She flicked on the lights. The warm glow illuminated my face, and she must have seen the cold, hard expression there. A wave of panic crossed her features. She rushed toward me, her hand outstretched as if to comfort me. I shifted away, and her hand froze in mid-air. "It's because of my father," I said, my voice heavy. A look of dawning horror, then realization, filled her eyes. "You remember?" My silence was all the answer she needed. "I can explain," she started, her voice laced with desperation. "I've explained all of this before." "Explain," I shot back, my own voice rising with a year's worth of buried grief and anger. "Why don't you go explain it to my dead father? You're a doctor. You could have saved him, but you chose not to. He could still be alive." My eyes, red-rimmed, burned with a new hatred. "There's nothing to explain. You left my father to die, and then you took advantage of my amnesia to make me your affair partner while you're still engaged to Caleb? Was it fun? Ava, did you enjoy the game?" I turned and stalked toward the door. She immediately blocked my path, her eyes wide with fear. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer, just tried to push past her. A desperate look crossed her face. "Don't go," she whispered. "I'll go." And just like that, she opened the door and was gone, the click of the lock echoing in the sudden quiet. For a moment, I just stood there. Then, I turned and started packing. I left everything that was a matching couples set untouched. The rest didn't amount to much. Luckily, because of my amnesia, the sale of my father's house had never been finalized. That was the only place that felt like home. I hired a cleaning service to wipe away any trace of me and had a moving company take my things. I was gone. The next evening, after a long surgery, Ava returned to the apartment. She opened the door to an empty, echoing darkness. She knew instantly. She ran to the bedroom and found the closet empty of my clothes. The drawers cleared out. Her breathing grew shallow. I had left. She pulled out her phone, her fingers hesitating before dialing my number. "Where did you go?" Her voice was hoarse, but soft. "Does it matter?" I replied coldly, and hung up. The next morning, I went to the hospital as usual. Ava was waiting for me with a bag of breakfast. I took it from her without a word and dropped it into the nearest trash can. I informed the chief of surgery that I was fully recovered and ready to resume all my duties. I buried myself in work, avoiding her all morning. As I was leaving that evening, an elegant, older woman stopped me. "Mr. Cole, my name is Elizabeth Vance. I'm Caleb's mother." Her expression was frosty, her tone anything but friendly. "Shall we have a talk?" I knew exactly what this was about. Some conversations are inevitable. A cold smile touched my lips. "Of course." We sat in a quiet coffee shop. I decided to get straight to the point. What happened before was my mistake. I never intended to interfere with their relationship. I want to make it clear to you now. Ava and I are over. There is nothing between us. To my surprise, the woman let out a small, condescending laugh. "Mr. Cole, even a child wouldn't believe a story like that. Our family has plenty of money. Name your price. Just leave Ava alone." I felt a surge of irritation. It was like she wasn't even listening. "I told you, there is nothing between Ava and me anymore." "If that's the case," she said with a smirk, "then why not leave Boston?" I scowled. "With all due respect, I don't think you're in a position to tell me what to do." "Humph. Surely Boston's renowned star surgeon wouldn't want it getting out that he's a homewrecker, meddling in other people's relationships. Would he?" Her voice was quiet, but the threat was crystal clear. There was no point in continuing. I stood up and walked out without another word. When I got home that night, I found a figure sitting on my living room sofa. The unexpected presence made me jump. Then, as my eyes adjusted to the dim light, my shock turned to anger. "Ava, what are you doing in my house? This is breaking and entering. I swear, I will call the cops right now and have you arrested." She rose slowly from the sofa and held out two small, red booklets. I stared at them, my mind reeling. Stamped on the cover of each was an official seal, and inside, under a line of formal text, was a photo of the two of us, side by side. Her voice, quiet but firm, echoed in the silent room. "Ethan, we're already married. I'm your wife." "That's impossible," I shot back. "I would never marry you." I snatched the marriage license from her hand, examining it under the light. It looked real. The red stamp from the city clerk's office, our signatures, the date from 6 months ago. It was all real. A wave of defeated resignation washed over me. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "Pick a date. We're getting a divorce." "No," she replied instantly, her brow furrowed. her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The sight of it made me laugh. A harsh, bitter sound. Caleb Vance sends you pastries every single day. The entire hospital knows you're his fiancé. And you secretly married me? Don't you see how ridiculous that is? It's not like that with Caleb, she insisted, her voice tight. Everyone in the hospital seems to think it is. I retorted. I took a deep breath, realizing we were getting sidetracked. But that's not even the point, and you know it. You know what the real issue is between us. My father. The memory of him was a wall I could never climb. I turned away from her and went to my room. When I came back out, she was gone. She'd taken the marriage license with her. A few days later, I saw Caleb Vance at the hospital. I had just finished a surgery and walked into my office to find him sitting there, waiting for me. I froze, assuming he was looking for Ava. Her office is down the hall, I said stiffly. His gaze was calm, his voice even. Can we talk? My guard went up immediately, expecting another confrontation like the one I'd had with his mother. But I quickly realized I was wrong. There was no hostility in his demeanor at all. Still wary, I poured him a glass of water and sat down across from him. What do you want to talk about? He took a sip, completely at ease. I know about you and Ava getting married. I was stunned but kept my face impassive. I couldn't get a read on this guy. How could a man be so calm when his fiancée had married someone else? Was he suppressing a volcano of rage, or did he just not care? His next words answered my question. Ava and I are just friends, he said simply. Our parents have been trying to set us up for years. You don't need to worry about it. I looked at him skeptically. If there's nothing between you, why are you sending gifts to the hospital every day? He smiled and shook his head. That's all my mother's doing. He set down his glass, seeing that I was starting to listen. Ava said you wouldn't believe her, that I had to come and explain it to you myself. So, now you know. He stood up to leave, then paused at the door as if remembering something. He turned back. And that night at the Cypress Grove, when I introduced myself as her fiancé, you can consider that her idea. She was trying to make you jealous. He left. I sat there, stunned, long after his footsteps had faded down the hall. That weekend, Ava and I drove out to Lookout Point. The salty air and the scent of pine seemed to wash away the sterile hospital smell that clung to me, bringing a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I led the way down the path to an old, weathered oak tree overlooking the ocean. Its branches were covered in faded ribbons and old, carved trinkets, the wishes and prayers of countless visitors. I started sifting through them. What are you looking for? Ava asked from behind me. A piece of driftwood, I said quietly. One with our names on it. She looked startled for a second, then joined the search. A few minutes later, she found it and handed it to me. I looked down at the faded, weather-beaten letters, a ghost of a memory surfacing. I left this here after you went to London, I told her. Her gaze fell on the inscription. Ethan and Ava, forever. A sharp intake of breath was her only response. The air around us felt thin. I gave a small, humorless laugh at my own youthful naivety. Clutching the piece of wood. Our wish, our promise. I walked over to a nearby fire pit where a small bonfire was crackling. Ava followed, her expression unreadable. She watched in silence as I tossed the driftwood into the flames. She was too late to stop me. We both watched as the fire licked at the wood, consuming our names, turning our forever into ash. I turned back to her, my face a blank mask. Ava, we can't go back. Without another word, I walked away, leaving her standing alone by the fire. Her solitary figure looked small and desolate as the last of the embers died out. In the days that followed, I stopped actively avoiding her. I simply treated her like any other colleague, a stranger. It was as if we were back to her first day at the hospital. Then one day she came to me for help. She placed a patient file on my desk. My eyes flickered over the complex case, and a bitter irony washed over me. I remembered myself, standing in this exact position, begging her to save my father. Now the roles were reversed. The patient was her father. The case was just as complicated. I looked up at her and smiled. A cold, sharp thing. You didn't save my father. What makes you think I'll save yours? Her gaze didn't waver. Because you won't let someone die? She said, her voice firm. She hesitated, then added, back then, I refused because I didn't care what her excuse was. I opened the file, cutting her off. I'll do it. I looked her straight in the eye. You're right. I won't let someone die. And I won't let my personal life affect my work. Because I know I'm a doctor. Her words died on her lips. She gave a slight nod and left my office. The surgery was scheduled quickly and went smoothly. Her father's condition stabilized. A few days later, during rounds, I saw her in the hallway. "We need to find time to go to the courthouse and sign the divorce papers," I said bluntly. She stopped, her body stiffening, but her voice was resolute. "I'm not going." I was about to argue when the world suddenly tilted. A black veil fell over my vision, and I collapsed. When I woke up, Ava was sitting by my bedside. The moment she saw my eyes open, a flicker of light returned to hers, but she seemed hesitant, unable to speak. I noticed she was clutching a lab report in her hand. "What is it?" I asked immediately. "What's wrong with me?" I assumed she was afraid to tell me bad news and reached for the report. She quickly hid it behind her back, her eyes darting away. Her secrecy only made me more suspicious. "Don't hide it," I said, my voice sharp with impatience. "Just tell me what it is." Ava's lips parted, and the words that came out felt like a detonation inside my skull. "Ethan, you're not sick. You just fainted from exhaustion and low blood sugar," she said softly. She held up the report. "This is mine. It's an ultrasound report. I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant." The words echoed in the silent room. I stared at her, my mind a complete blank. After what felt like an eternity, I finally snapped back to reality and took the report from her hand. Gestation. 8 weeks. 3 days. It was real. I looked up, meeting her eyes. The usual ice was gone, replaced with a vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. A mixture of tenderness and fear. I took a deep breath, the familiar antiseptic smell of the hospital filling my lungs. The past, my father, her refusal. It all came rushing back. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. Ava immediately bent down and placed my shoes in front of me. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice laced with anxiety. I didn't answer. I just took her by the arm and pulled her toward the door. As I opened it, I said, my voice as cold as steel, "I'm taking you to get rid of it." Her hand shot out and grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. I turned to face her. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her dark eyes shining with a desperate plea. "Ethan, the baby is innocent," she whispered, shaking her head. I stared back at her, my resolve hardening. "I will not let you have this child." I broke her grip, took her by the wrist, and started pulling her down the hallway. She struggled against me, but it was useless. We were almost to the OB/GYN clinic, when the hospital's overhead speakers crackled to life with a mass casualty alert. Instantly, doctors and nurses began sprinting toward the emergency room. This only happened when there was a major disaster. A second later, both our pagers went off. A multi-car pileup on the interstate. All thoughts of our fight vanished. I let go of her and ran. At the entrance to the main operating room, I stopped her. "You're pregnant. I'll take this one." "I can do it," she insisted, her gaze unwavering. "I said I'll do it," I repeated, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Don't waste time." She bit her lip but finally relented. I pushed past her into the chaos of the OR. The patient was in worse shape than I'd imagined. Multiple traumatic injuries, a severed artery. Blood was everywhere. At one point, a spray of it hit my face, and a colleague quickly wiped it away. Somehow, we pulled him through. The surgery was a success. I finally allowed myself to relax, but I'd barely had a moment to breathe when the door burst open. It was Leo, his face pale with panic. "Ethan, the patient from that crash. He just tested positive for HIV." My blood ran cold. I clearly remembered the blood spattering my face. I couldn't be sure if any had gotten in my eyes. Leo thrust a bottle of pills into my hand. "It's the PEP medication. Take it now." I took it numbly. A text came in from the chief, ordering me home for mandatory rest and follow-up testing. I changed out of my scrubs and walked to the hospital entrance. I was about to call an Uber when a car pulled up in front of me. Ava rolled down the window. "Get in." I was too exhausted to argue. I got in. She turned on the stereo, and soft, classical music filled the car. Slowly, the tension began to drain from my body, and my eyelids grew heavy. She must have parked the car somewhere along the way. She reclined my seat, turned down the music, and just watched me sleep, her expression softening. I don't know how long I was out. When I woke up, we were parked in front of my apartment building. I saw her looking at me, her brow furrowed with concern. She started to reach a hand toward my face, but stopped herself when she saw my eyes were open. I sat up, adjusting the seat. "Have you reconsidered?" she asked quietly. "About the baby?" The image of my father lying in a hospital bed flashed in my mind. My hands clenched into fists. I looked at her flat stomach, and my voice was firm. No. Her face fell. She reached into her purse and handed me the bottle of pills. This is your post-exposure medication, she said, her voice strained. Don't forget to take it. I'll arrange for your meals to be delivered. You need to rest. I nodded, took the pills and got out of the car. As I watched her drive away, a wave of conflict washed over me. I had lied. In that moment, watching her sleep, I had decided to let her keep the child. But because of my father, I could never accept being a family with her. Maybe if I disappeared, the baby could bring her some measure of comfort. A comfort I could never provide. For the next month, I was a prisoner in my own home, forcing down the powerful antiretroviral drugs and their brutal side effects. But I was determined. During my quarantine, I wasn't idle. I listed my father's house for sale online. It was in a great location and had appreciated over the years. Offers started pouring in. The money would be more than enough to start a new life abroad. The day I signed the final sale contract, my test results came back from the hospital. Negative. I wasn't infected. Ava came over personally to give me the good news. She must have found out that I'd canceled the appointment at the clinic, because she seemed to think it meant I was changing my mind. She was in high spirits, showing up with bags of groceries full of all my favorite things and cooking an elaborate meal. For the first time in a long time, we sat at the same table in peace. We didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't hostile. I watched as she placed food on my plate, and after a moment's hesitation, I ate it. A small, genuine smile touched her lips. After dinner, she cleaned up with practiced efficiency, then placed a cup of hot tea in front of me before disappearing. I sat with a book in my lap, unable to read a single page. A little while later, she re-emerged, dressed to leave. I'm heading out, she said from the doorway. I looked up at her. Okay, I said, my throat tight. The door clicked shut. I turned my gaze to the window. The sky was dark and heavy, pregnant with a storm. A few days later, I handed the keys to the new owners. I took one last look at the house that held so many memories, then walked away without looking back. At the hospital, everyone noticed the change in Dr. Chun. Her icy demeanor was starting to thaw, the constant tension in her shoulders relaxing. My recent attitude toward her had given her hope. Leaving work that evening, she was already planning what to cook for me. The stress of the past few weeks had taken its toll. I had lost weight. She placed a gentle hand on her stomach. The thought of a new life, a small piece of both of us, brought an involuntary smile to her face. But as she passed the nurse's station, she overheard a snippet of conversation. I heard Dr. Cole took a long leave of absence, put his career on hold for a while. The words hit her like a thunderclap. She knew instantly what it meant. She bolted from the hospital and raced to her car. Minutes later, she was standing outside my old house, knocking frantically. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged couple she had never seen before. Can I help you? The woman asked. Ava checked the address on the door, confused. I'm looking for Ethan Cole. The couple's guarded expressions softened. Oh, you mean the man who sold us the house? I think he mentioned he was moving abroad. The sale closed a few days ago. Ava stared at them, her world tilting on its axis. When did he leave? Did he say which country? They just shook their heads. Apologetic, they didn't know. She walked away in a daze. As dusk settled over the city, she remained in her car, parked across the street, calling my number over and over, each call going straight to voicemail. She contacted everyone we knew. No one had heard from me. Finally, as if making a last, desperate decision, she started the car and sped toward the airport. She was still miles away when she saw it. A plane, climbing into the darkening sky, carving a silver path toward the clouds. Ava watched it go, a cold certainty settling in her heart. Suddenly, a massive semi-truck, headlights glaring, swerved into her lane. By the time she saw it, it was too late. On the plane, I was jolted awake by a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest. I gasped, pressing a hand to my heart, overwhelmed by a sudden, inexplicable wave of dread that took a long time to subside. On the highway near Logan Airport, the crash caused a massive traffic jam. By the time the paramedics arrived, they found Ava in the mangled wreckage of her car, barely alive. She had multiple fractures, and the ground beneath her was stained a deep, dark red. Her face was as white as a sheet. One of the EMTs recognized her instantly. My God, it's Dr. Chun. They rushed her to Boston General. In the operating room, the mood was grim as her colleagues fought to save her. We have to do everything we can, the chief surgeon said, his voice tight. Try to minimize any long-term damage. This is exactly the kind of complex trauma case Dr. Cole and Dr. Chun are masters at. A resident muttered. If only he were here. Everyone had seen it. The undeniable chemistry between Ethan Cole and Ava Chun. A true power couple. No one understood how things had gotten so broken between them. Now he was gone. And she was fighting for her life because she had tried to follow him. By the time Ava's surgery was over, my plane was landing in Zurich. The clean air and stunning scenery felt like the perfect place to be alone. I rented a small cottage in the countryside and settled into a quiet life with the landlord and his family. Not long after, I fell gravely ill myself. As I was being wheeled into surgery, for some reason, Ava's face floated into my mind. At that same moment, thousands of miles away, Ava was in physical therapy, learning to walk again. She had lost the baby in the crash, and her body was left with permanent injuries. Her colleagues watched her, a thin, solitary figure, and shook their heads in sorrow. Leo, feeling her tragedy deeply, tried multiple times to contact me to tell me what had happened. But my number had been disconnected. My email shut down. I had vanished. 5 years went by. My life in Switzerland was peaceful, but my mind was not. I was plagued by anxiety and insomnia. A doctor told me my psychological trauma was worsening, impacting my health. To heal, he said, I had to go back. I had to face my past. I packed my bags, said goodbye to my landlords, and booked a flight home. I landed in Boston on the anniversary of my father's death. I hadn't been to his grave in 5 years. It was the first thing I had to do. But when I arrived at the cemetery, I found the gravestone was clean and immaculate. At its base sat 2 bouquets of fresh white lilies. Who had been tending to it all these years? I pushed the question aside and laid out my own offerings. Dad, Mom, are you doing okay up there? I came to see you. My voice was thick with emotion, my eyes blurring as I spoke to them, catching them up on the lost years. After a long time, I finally stood up to leave. As I turned, I saw her, standing a short distance away, clutching a bouquet of white lilies, was Ava. The woman standing before me was a shadow of the one I remembered. She was painfully thin, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of years of sleepless nights. The moment she saw me, her eyes widened, and a film of tears instantly clouded her vision. We stared at each other across the manicured lawn, my own breath catching in my throat. I was frozen, completely unsure of what to do or say. Ethan. Her voice was a trembling whisper. She took a hesitant step toward me. Her arms started to rise, as if to embrace me. But then she stopped, letting them hang awkwardly at her sides. Seeing her like that, so fragile and uncertain, sent a sharp pang through my chest. I closed the distance between us and wrapped my arms around her frail body. At my touch, the tears she'd been holding back finally broke free, streaming down her face. Thank you, I murmured into her hair, my own voice tight, for taking care of my parents' grave all these years. She just sobbed, her hands clutching the back of my jacket. I'm sorry, Ethan, she repeated over and over. I'm so sorry. Please don't leave again. Okay? The strong, unbreakable woman I had known was gone. I took a deep breath, my hands hovering over her back before gently patting her shoulder. I'm not going anywhere, at least not for a while. Ethan, she choked out, can we talk? It was why I had come back, to untangle the knots of the past. I nodded. She drove me to my father's house. I was shocked to find it was now hers. She had bought it back from the couple I'd sold it to. Stepping inside, everything was just as I remembered it, but with the subtle imprint of her solitary life layered over it. My heart sank. I thought about the child I had told her to keep, but there was no sign of one anywhere. A bitter thought crossed my mind. Maybe it was for the best. Ava didn't say much. She just started busying herself in the kitchen, preparing lunch. A faint light had returned to her tired eyes. She seemed almost happy. I sat in the living room, waiting, my gaze wandering around the familiar space. Then, I saw them. A pair of crutches tucked away in a corner. Why would she have crutches? A sense of unease settled over me. I got up to investigate and found a thick folder of medical records and surgical reports on a nearby shelf. The moment I opened it, the world fell out from under me. A wave of suffocation washed over me as the words blurred before my eyes. This can't be real. I finally understood. The accident report listed the location, the highway just outside the airport, and the date. It was the day I left the country. Seeing that the surgery had been performed at Boston General, I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I scrolled through my contacts for Leo's number. What happened to Ava in that car crash 5 years ago? I demanded as soon as he picked up, dispensing with any pleasantries. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. Ethan? Is that you? You're back. After I confirmed it was me, he explained. She was trying to get to the airport to find you, man. A truck crossed the median and hit her head on. She almost died. He took a heavy breath. She lost the baby, Ethan. She's been in and out of physical therapy for years. She's only just now getting back to something close to normal. The phone felt heavy in my hand. I don't know how long I stood there, processing it all. Ethan, lunch is ready. Ava called from the kitchen. I spun around to look at her, even with the exhaustion etched onto her face. She managed a gentle smile when she saw me. For a moment, I was lost. I nodded numbly and sat down at the table. She was quiet as we ate, just kept putting food on my plate. After a while, she seemed to gather her courage. Ethan, she began, her voice soft. About your father. Just then, her phone rang. An emergency call from the hospital. I will explain everything, I promise, she said, quickly answering the call. A moment later, she was gone, leaving her own meal untouched. I sat there alone, her words hanging in the air. But as I thought about it, a cold truth settled back in my heart. An explanation didn't change anything. My father was still dead. That was a chasm between us that could never be crossed. A few minutes later, my phone rang too. It was Dr. Wallace. Ethan, my boy. Leo told me you were back. That's fantastic news. He boomed. Listen, I've got a critical patient here. We don't have time to fly in a specialist. Can you help us out? I didn't have to think twice. I'm on my way. My years abroad had been spent honing my skills. Dr. Wallace knew he could count on me. By the time the surgery was successfully completed, it was evening. I left the OR, exhausted but satisfied, and ran right into Leo. He was ecstatic to see me and insisted on catching up. Hey, you'll never guess who showed up at the hospital today, he said conspiratorially. Some handsome European guy. Turns out he's the son of Dr. Chen's old mentor from London. I don't care, I said, turning to leave. Whoa, man, he said, grabbing my arm. A look of mock disbelief on his face. Dr. Chen is a beautiful woman. Aren't you worried someone's going to snatch her up? I just raised an eyebrow. Okay, I'm just kidding, he said, grinning. But seriously, I'm dying to know what they're talking about in there. Before I could protest, he was pulling me down the hall toward Ava's office. We stopped just outside her door, and I could hear their conversation clearly. My English was fluent, so I understood every word. The man was talking about a rare, aggressive neurological condition. I froze. It was the same condition my father had. The success rate for that surgery is incredibly low. The man was saying in a gentle voice, my father's surgery was ultimately unsuccessful, but my family never once blamed you. If you want to advance in your field, you have to find the courage to face these challenges. Then I heard Ava's voice, raw and raspy. Not being able to save my mentor is the greatest regret of my life, she said. I'm a coward. When I was faced with my husband's father, suffering from the same condition, I just couldn't find the courage. She trailed off, her voice thick with emotion. The specialist you recommended for me arrived in Boston, but by then, it was already too late. The world tilted. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I felt my knees buckle. Leo caught me just in time, his own face a mask of shock. He had just wanted a bit of gossip. He never expected to stumble upon the truth behind our entire tragedy. He finally understood why I had left, and why Ava had never defended herself. I don't remember walking back to my office. All those times she had tried to explain, and I had cut her off, refused to listen. How could I ever face her now? That night, we returned to the house one after the other. Ava looked at me, her eyes full of things unsaid. Ethan, about your father. I know. I cut her off gently. I know everything. A look of surprise crossed her face, but she didn't speak. I knew what she was wondering. What happened now? It wasn't your fault, I said. Then, I stood up, faced her, and bowed deeply. My voice was filled with a sincerity I hadn't felt in years. All this time, I was wrong about you. I'm so sorry. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. But then she smiled, a real, brilliant smile that reached her eyes. It's okay, she whispered. I forgave you a long time ago. Watching her, radiant with a joy that washed away the years of pain, I felt the heavy weight I had been carrying finally lift. We should plan the wedding, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. My own heart started to pound, and I couldn't quite meet her gaze. The silence stretched on. I finally looked up, curious. In the next second, She closed the distance between us and kissed me. It was a kiss that held 5 years of pain, regret, and unspoken love. We held on to each other, our shared breath a testament to everything we had survived. When we finally broke apart, she was breathless, her body limp in my arms. She wrapped her arms around my neck, her cheeks flushed. She leaned in close, her warm breath tickling my ear. Her voice a soft, hopeful whisper. "Ethan, let's have another baby." "Okay," I said, lifting her into my arms and carrying her toward the bedroom. Outside, the setting sun painted the clouds in shades of soft rose, and on the wall, our two shadows slowly merged into one. All the words left unsaid over the years dissolved into a silent, perfect rhythm, finally in harmony.